Joe Biden, a big winner in Super Tuesday's contest, sweeping the South, including Texas, giving him momentum as frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination. Sanders, however, making a strong showing in California and expected to win there, and picking up wins in Colorado, Utah, and his home state of Vermont. Biden is now leading in the delegate count and feeling confident after his strong showing. But Sanders shows no signs of discouragement.
We're told, well, when you got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy.
I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination.
Despite spending more than $500 million, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg only won American Samoa and a total of 45 delegates. That means each delegate appears to have cost him more than $11 million. Today, Bloomberg is reassessing his campaign. It may also be the end of the line for Senator Elizabeth Warren, who finished third in her home state, Massachusetts. Pat?
Chief Political Analyst David Brody is with us now. David, you're calling this the Democrats' big freakout moment. Why do you say that?
Well, look, I think what happened here, Pat, and there was a recalibration on Super Tuesday. Democrats across the country, especially in the South, but in other states too, Minnesota, Massachusetts, all went for Biden. Why? Democrats looked at this and said, wait a minute, are we going to actually nominate a socialist as our nominee in the fall to go up against Trump? And they said, hang on. They pulled back the reins. And look, lo and behold, we have Joe Biden. It has been a perfect storm, if you think about it, Pat, for Joe Biden. This has been pretty remarkable. It makes me think of John McCain back in 2008. Remember him, the comeback kid at the time, and he went on to win the nomination. Joe Biden, even more impressive this time around. Everybody left him for dead, but he had a perfect storm. You know, he had that good debate performance, finally, in South Carolina. Everybody else bashed Bernie in that debate. Then he had the big blowout win in South Carolina, and then the key thing happened, which we've talked about here on the 700 Club, Pat. We said between February 29th and March 3rd, after South Carolina and before Super Tuesday, would there be some of these candidates that get out of the race? Indeed, they did. Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Steyer, and all of a sudden, a lot of that went over to Biden, and here we are. Also, Bloomberg ended up being a dud. Nothing personal there. I just mean electorally. And then Elizabeth Warren stayed in the race, and that hurt Bernie. So you put it all together. It was a perfect storm for Joe Biden on Tuesday. It was a Super Tuesday, or as he would call it, maybe Super Thursday. You know, he's had some gaffes along the way.
What do you think coming up? You know, it looks like the Democrats are rejecting Bernie Sanders. They just don't want to be running with a socialist because they figure those in the down market ballots are going to get killed. So Biden has the momentum. Do you think he's going to win these next primaries coming up?
Well, he does have momentum. The primary road actually looks better for Sanders next week, a week from Tuesday. You've got Michigan, 125 delegates, and he should do well there. And Washington State, where he's going to clean up, and that's almost 100 delegates there. So we could have a different conversation next week. Here's the problem for Bernie Sanders. Florida's coming up. Georgia's coming up. That's not good news for Sanders. Those are big states with a lot of delegates at stake, and Joe Biden should do well there. And so you have all of this kind of back and forth. Look, I think ultimately the Democrats are in this ideological fight. You know, which way is this party going to go? Here's the bad news for Democrats. Clearly, with the progressive young 18 to 29 folks, they love Bernie. That's the socialism crowd, if you will. And that seems to be the future, the way the Democrats are heading. But the brakes were put on that last night with Joe Biden, most traditional Democrats saying, yeah, not right now, folks.
Well, I'm told a bunch of those youngsters didn't show up to vote. Sanders thought he had that huge army of people, and the army people just were deserters they were AOL during the election. What happened?
Well, look, he did do well with younger voters, but you're right. Not as many showed up. Still, he did well. They may have been on their PlayStation 4. I don't know what they were doing specifically, but Joe Biden did much better with folks over 55, specifically over 65, and that makes the difference. Also, what's interesting is to see the difference between support among African Americans for Joe Biden. I think that's an affinity vote as it relates to, their love for Biden because of the Obama years. And then Hispanics are flooding over to Bernie. So there is this ideological fight, and that is good news for Donald Trump because, look, as we move on here, Pat, into the fall, look, if Bernie loses, there's going to be a problem with energy with the Democrats because a lot of those progressive younger voters, if he couldn't get some of them to show up in the primary, are they really going to show up in the fall for Joe Biden? That's a problem. If Joe Biden loses and Bernie's the nominee, well, then Trump's running against the socialists. So either way, this seems like it should be good news for Donald Trump.
Well, the key issue seemed to be over and over again, we want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. But, without any disparagement, and I do like Joe Biden, he's just a nice and likable guy, but he has more gaffes. I mean, if we put together a reel of the stupid things he said, he couldn't even remember the verses to the national anthem, I think. I mean, when he comes up against Trump, Trump's going to kill him.
Well, it could be disastrous for Joe Biden. Look, I want to do a disclaimer as well. I've interviewed Joe Biden, know Joe Biden. He's a decent man. He's had a lot of tragedy in his life. He's overcome a lot, for sure. There's the disclaimer part. But look, here's the truth. I mean, Joe Biden is winning in spite of himself, not because of himself. I mean, he has had gaffe after gaffe. I mean, like I said, the other day he called in Dallas, Texas this week, he called Super Tuesday Super Thursday. He tried to quote the Declaration of Independence and botched that, said all men and women are created. And then he thought, and he said, the thing. It's equal. So anyhow, the point simply is that there is a reel on Biden. And here's the good news for Sanders. Biden could slip up again between now and the convention. And so Bernie's going to stay in this, obviously. And, we could have a lot more twists and turns. This is like as the world turns. As the Democrats turn, we need the soap opera music.